Hello, everybody, and welcome to our live event with Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester. My name is Jennifer. I am head of Excluded UK, and I will be presiding over the events of this morning. And we look forward to any comments you've got to make in the comments, and we'll come back to you later if there's anybody got any questions. But for now, I will hand over to Andy Burnham. There you go, Andy.
Thanks, Jennifer. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining, and it's good to be with you again. Firstly, I just wanted to say well done for keeping going and staying together. I want you to all know at the start that I supported you with Steve Rotherham and other mayors back in the pandemic, and we support you now. The passage of time doesn't change that. I'm sorry if we've not been out there enough for you, and I certainly can kind of use today to change that. But the support for you is strong. It's there, and it will always be there. And the reason being because the level of injustice that you've faced is indefensible. We would just remind, actually, the kind of mind goes back, doesn't it, to 2020, and it's almost like it's a kind of period that will forever be etched on our minds. It was the biggest crisis that we have faced in our lifetimes, anybody of my age or of our generation, and yet millions of people in a national crisis, international crisis, were left without support. And I think we've got to get better, perhaps, on your behalf at describing the level of injustice that happened here. It's huge, isn't it? When you're in a position when the world has stopped and, your way of making money is kind of basically dried up, for the state to leave some people without anything, without enough to get by, and to cause the levels of mental anguish that it did is just, it's kind of, it's barely believable, actually. And I just, if I cast my mind back, I had the feeling when we were working with you in that intense period that in the end, something, would have to give, and, and beyond minor things that they conceded, the fact that they didn't ever answer the full sort of argument that was being put to them, that it was indefensible that millions had been excluded, is just, it really does sort of beg a belief, actually. And yet they've wanted just to move on, and the world's wanted to move on, as though 2020 and 2021 didn't happen. We've seen it in not just in the case of people excluded from support. You look at what they've done to young people in schools, where there was a report saying that there needed to be huge kind of restoration in terms of people's education. £15 billion was the figure that was put on it. That was just ignored. So many other things from that period were just, it was like it didn't happen, and then they've just tried to move on. And I, do think that the Treasury is at the heart of this, and it's got huge questions to answer. I mean, Jennifer, I am here to listen, and I'm really, want to hear from people this morning in terms of what life has been like, and to what extent you've been able to recover things. But I imagine that a lot of people are still in a permanently worse position because of what happened. And I just would be keen to hear what life is like. And I think there's sort of two actions for me that I'll come back to perhaps at the end, but I'll just put on the table now. The first is, I think we just need a discussion really about how we tell the story better, how we get it back in the public eye. As I said at the start, this is a major injustice. To leave people without anything in a national crisis is appalling. And as you will all know, I've worked on many justice campaigns over the years, Hillsborough being the one perhaps people would know most, but I was closely involved in the infected blood public inquiry, and others as well. And I think we need to start talking about Excluded UK as part of that same thing, where you have a post office being obviously the most recent example, where you have an unaccountable state that treats some people as second-class citizens. That's what it tried to do to the sub-postmasters mistresses. It's what it tried to do to the infected blood community, and what it tried to do to the Hillsborough families. But in all of those cases, people fought back, and we need to fight back with you and talk about this injustice in those terms. We've got a commitment of a Hillsborough law coming through from Labour if they win the election. You know, that will be an opportunity to tell the story of what happened more directly and in that context, because I think it is the same. It's the unaccountability of the British state, the brutality at times of the British state, acting in the way that it does without justification and without there being sufficient accountability. And I'm here today to listen, but to hopefully tell that story for you, with you, and to make it better understood. Because I still think there's many people out there the people who were lucky to benefit from furlough and other things still, I don't think, understand the position that many of you were left in. The second thing then is, what then might a doable restitution look like? And I think there's an interesting opportunity that might arise with the appointment of the COVID corruption commissioner, because that might be one way that we start to talk about how financial recompense can be made if there is to be billions of pounds recovered from the fraud that we saw in the pandemic, the faulty PPE, etc. Then that, I think, creates an opportunity to say, well, and some of that should come back and go to the people who were excluded during that period. And I think we're going to have to just be realistic, given the way finances are at the moment. But the principle is absolutely clear to me, that you were denied support that you should have had in that time, and that has not gone away. As much as the state would like it to go away, it has not gone away. And therefore, we need to start putting forward reasonable asks with regard to financial restitution. So that's how I see it at this Monday morning, Jennifer. I hope some of those thoughts are helpful to get the discussion going today. I'll hand back to you now, but I do really want to listen to colleagues this morning, and then I'll come back at the end to see if we can agree a bit of a way forward. Thanks very much.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Andy, for that intro. And for those of us that are excluded, we really appreciate your ongoing support. It really means a lot to all our members. For those of you watching who are not familiar with Excluded UK, we represent the 3.8 million UK taxpayers who were excluded from fair and equal COVID-19 financial support. 3.8 million is around 10% of the working population, which is more than the population of Wales. So it's not a small amount of people. We have to acknowledge that the support schemes that were granted were fabulous. They were delivered very quickly for the 90% of people who received them. So we cannot criticise the government for the speed at which they delivered the schemes. We do need to acknowledge that there were small businesses and limited company directors who were affected, but not just them. We had over 20 different categories of people, including new starters, new businesses, PAYE freelancers, newly self-employed, those who were denied furlough, directors paid in dividends, directors paid PAYE annually, those who were made redundant before the 19th of March 2020, directors of companies that were not in profit, those who were self-employed with 50,000 plus trading profits, businesses ineligible for business grants, those on maternity, parental or adoption leave, those earning less than 50% income from self-employment, and also those whose personal circumstances have affected their entitlement to support. For example, pensions, bereavement allowance, carers allowance, students, armed forces veterans, and many, many more. So there's a whole wide range of people, but also there is a double whammy for one group who were excluded, and that is the WASPI women, the 1950s WASPI women whose pensions were affected, and on top of that, some of them were excluded. So our heart goes out to our WASPIs. We really cherish them because they've had such a rough ride, and we stand with them all the way through this. As I said, we can't fault the speed and generosity of the support schemes, but Excluded UK did draw the government's attention to the fact that there were 10% of us who had not been granted schemes. We didn't fit the criteria, and we were just desperate for their support. We all turned television on and saw Rishi Sunak saying, you know, we're going to look after you, no one's going to be left behind, blah, 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 blah. Unfortunately, it didn't materialise. And so our members had to look elsewhere for financial support. Nobody has 2 years worth of bills stashed down the back of the sofa. Well, I certainly don't. And so they had to take out bounce back loans. You know, Rishi Sunak said, oh, we've got this wonderful scheme. It's a loan, it's debt, it's something that is going to go on for years and years while people are paying it back, whereas their counterparts obviously received the money that they don't have to pay back. People took out credit card debt, personal loans from family and friends, overdrafts. We had members who had to sell their houses, their cars, family heirlooms, wedding rings even, and other personal and sentimental jewellery. We had people sleeping in cars. I'm not just talking about individuals. We had whole families sleeping in their cars because when they went to the council after losing their homes, the council put them in accommodation, which was really not suitable for families, especially with very young children, because these places, these hostels, were also housing people who, let's say they weren't in the best of mental or physical health, either due to drink or drugs or other social related issues. So we had people sleeping in caravans or tents on family and friends' land, or one family had a family of 4 that was sleeping in a tent on the embankment of a river. We have people who they used to donate to food banks regularly, and then they were the ones in receipt of the food bank parcels. And that is really, really hard when you go from one extreme to the other. They were also humiliated by having to take out handouts from our COVID support scheme. We set up on the 3rd of December a fund for people to put into. It was on my niece's 3rd birthday, and I was on the phone to a lady saying, how can I tell my little girl that Santa hasn't put her on the naughty list because I can't afford presents or food or tinsel or trees or anything like that. And I was sat watching my niece open a whole heap of birthday presents, and I couldn't do anything else but set up this fund. And within 10 days we'd raised £15,000, who we distributed to the 153 most deserving families who were desperate to provide their family with a worthwhile Christmas. Whilst all this was going on, the first 3 of the 5 SICE grants paid £3.5 billion to employers whose turnover, the SICE they paid to people whose self-employment did not reduce in 2020 and 2021. In fact, some people, their business profits increased. If people were having garden landscaping done with their money, or building, people could still bring in building contractors because it was classed as essential work. And so some companies actually increased their profits. Also, the spending on the job retention scheme By October 2020, this included 1.5 billion that was paid to employers whose turnover did not fall and who would not have cut their workforce even without the grant. So you've got one extreme to the other. There's people getting support financially and lots of it that didn't need it. And then on the other end of the scale, you have the excluded community who were scratching around looking for, coppers wherever they could find them, raiding their own children's piggy banks and post office accounts for the university funds. We had people on the phone that just felt like they were the scourge of society, what they were having to do to support their families. We have a video that two of the excluded took at a Conservative hustings, and Rishi Sunak said, well, they probably weren't Conservative voters anyway, like that's some sort of justification for leaving 10% of the population to fend for themselves. We weren't given the support, but on top of that, we were called fraudsters. That's a really hard pill to swallow. And then after being called fraudsters, we then have to pay increased taxes to cover COVID fraud, which again, really sticks in the throat. And also paying increased taxes to pay for the support schemes that we didn't qualify for. So as you can imagine, there are a lot of excluded people with some very dim views of this government. And what's been even harder, watching the debates on television, which obviously we've been glued to, and Rishi's getting away again with saying he supported everybody through COVID. What's even more disappointing is the opposition parties are not challenging that, despite the fact that they know about the 3.8 million excluded, and that is really disheartening and an extra kick in the teeth for those of us who did not receive a single penny. We've got a couple of excluded UK members with us this morning. And first of all, I'm going to hand over to Maria. Maria is actually on the Excluded UK team. And I've invited Maria to talk because in 4 years, none of the members of team have actually come on one of these events. They have spoken at other events. But Maria, would you like to unmute and tell us your story, please?
I will indeed. Okay, so my name's Maria, and I run a small dance school it's based in South East London, and I have been running the dance school for nearly 25 years now. And it's not like a performance school. It was just like I hire local community halls and church halls and things like that to run classes in, to basically get people together, to teach them to dance, to enjoy the music, to engage with other people. And it was small, but it was successful. I've paid tax as a self-employed person for 25 years. So when we went into lockdown, obviously all my classes and therefore my ability to earn any money at all was completely gone. Everything was shut down immediately. And I know we were all in shock, and of course we all thought that lockdown was probably only going to be 3 weeks and everybody would survive. I mean, I did learn about the SICE, the self-employed support system. So I logged on to the government website and put in my UTC, is it UTC, unique tax code, whatever it is, and press the button, and then it comes back with this screen and it says you are not eligible. I thought, how could I not be eligible for support? I've been, I pay tax, I've done all the things I'm supposed to do. And I thought, oh, it must be a mistake. So I redid it. I put all my stuff in again and pressed the button, and I still get, you're not eligible. I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because I could not see any way of earning any money at all. And so I phoned my accountant and I kind of wailed down the phone at her, what's happening? What am I going to do? And she said, don't worry, it's definitely a mistake. I'll sort it out for you. Don't worry. And then about 2 hours later, she calls me back and she says, it's not a mistake. Because of the way the government has worked out the qualifying criteria, you're not eligible. And the reason I'm not eligible is I got divorced in 2015, and I took a drawdown from my private pension to help me buy a house. and I took quite a lot of money out of the pension to help me buy a new house when I got divorced. And of course that went into my books as it goes in as other income. And so that money that I took down, unfortunately, because of the qualifying criteria, put my self-employed profits from the dance school under the 50% of income from self-employment. And even though I actually didn't have the money, it's not like I had a couple of £100,000 sticking around doing nothing, because it bought the house for me. It doesn't matter. It didn't matter where the money came from, whether it was a pension, anything like that. If it put your self-employed profits under the 50%, you were just not eligible for any support whatsoever. So it was quite devastating. It was almost like they didn't really care about those type of people. Whereas obviously I had some savings because I'm a sensible self-employed person, and I had some savings should I not be able to work, or I'd injured myself, or I had other disasters or whatever. So I basically just lived off my savings. I did run some Zoom online classes, but Jennifer came to a few actually. But they're very soulless, and it's very difficult. And of course, lockdown just kept going on, and it went on and it went on, and my savings went down and down and down. And even when we got back, well, it wasn't even normal when we got back. I think they let us out in about June, didn't they? July, and then we locked down again over the Christmas, and it was just horrific. And my savings I basically haven't got any left anymore. I'm still trying to rebuild now. It was tough, and I like to think that I'm quite resilient. But when you go, they say, oh, you can have a loan. I did apply for the assisted restrictions grant actually, because Jennifer said apply for these, and I thought, oh no, I'm not going to get them, because most of them, I don't actually live in London, I live in Kent. And I applied to Greenwich, which is the council where I hire most of my halls, and they said, oh, we can't claim here because you don't pay business tax and you don't pay rates. You have to claim where you live. And of course, I don't live anywhere where that local council will profit from any of my business, because although I did apply for a couple, and I did get a little bit of money, so I did get a couple of little grants, but it was nowhere near what I would normally have earned had my classes been running, and had I got any support from the government. And I'm still paying back my bounce back loan, so I did take a bounce back loan to help me re-advertise and trying to build my classes back up again. But sometimes it's not even about the money, it's about the it's like it wasn't important to them at all, the fact that my little dance school that helped loads of people, it helped their mental health, it helped them exercise, it helped everything like that. It's just not important. It just wasn't on their radar, even though I was self-employed and I'd been paying my taxes. I actually felt proud to be a UK taxpayer when Rishi Sunak said, don't worry, all those people left at home will look after you. And I thought, oh, thank God for that, because I didn't know how to earn any money. And then it just goes, well, tits up, I suppose you'd call it, wouldn't you? So that was my story. So I'm still trying to rebuild. I haven't been able to get back to pre-pandemic levels with the classes yet. I actually stopped teaching children in the end, because my kind of heart went out a bit, and I just thought I can't face going back with the kids. So I now only teach adults. So I have cut my work, if you like, my pool of pupils down a bit. But it was like my heart went out a bit. It's like, and literally what I'm trying to do now, I'm trying to, rebuild, but I don't think I'll ever get back to what it was before. So that's my story.
Thank you so much for
You're
that,
welcome.
Maria. And yes, your Zumba classes were fantastic for me during lockdown. They kept me going. I met a whole bunch of new ladies that I would have never have met had the pandemic going. Like with the Excluded, I would have never met all these people. So if that's the legacy of this terrible thing, then that's brilliant. But yes,
yeah, I have to say that actually, that I have met people, you and then some of the other team, and being together like that, all being in the same boat, has really helped the support and everything like that.
That will never ever go. So thank you, Maria. Really appreciate your story. As for this bond that will never ever be broken by anybody, and the only people that can understand are fellow excluded, we have somebody that can understand this on two levels. Cheryl is also a team member historically and is amazing, and one of our poster girls. Cheryl has served in the armed forces in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Bosnia, and so she has an unbreakable bond with her guys. So Cheryl, I'll hand over to you for your story, darling.
Thank you, Jennifer, for those kind words. Maria, honestly, my heart is back in 2020 as we were. Do you know what I mean? Andy, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We appreciated your support during it. Right, so my story. I'm Cheryl Jones. I had a business called Take a Lead. It was pet sitting, dog walking, and I did this after 22 years in the armed forces, in the army. I left the army a very proud person. It's just been Armed Forces Day this weekend, and I know that the armed forces are well respected. I feel proud when I'm in this, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm wearing it today, sort of give me a little bit of support, because I did struggle. So going back to 2020, my business was thriving. 12 years I've been at it, and it was just, it's just such an amazing business working. You always say, don't work with animals, don't work with children. I'm telling you now, working with animals was the best thing ever. I was still the sergeant major. I was, bossing them around. It was great. But then obviously COVID came, and I understood, being in the armed forces, you get a feel of what's happening. You understand, something like that pandemic, when it was coming, I knew something wasn't right. It was going to be a little bit of but I didn't realize how long it would take, how it affected everybody. So I just said, when Rishi Sunak or the government said, everybody must stay at home. I complied, because it's what I do, And I said goodbye to all my clients, said I'll see you in a couple of weeks when it's all over, and we'll get back to normal, and take care. Unfortunately, my business never came back. And it's never come back. Anyway, but going back to my story, obviously, Rishi Sunak said all self-employed people will not be left alone. Now, I was on a small army pension. I was also I had to be self-employed, or I had to have another job, because that wasn't enough to live on. And I was very sensible, like you, Maria, with my money. You've got to be. Being self-employed, you never know what's going to happen. I had a few mishaps walking the dogs, nearly broke my legs and all of that. You never know what will happen. So you always put a little bit away, and it's not being fraudulent. It's saving money for a rainy day, just in case. Unfortunately, that's all gone, because I had to live on that. But I, went out into the community. I can't remember what it was called. It was the NHS thing. They were calling out for people to be volunteers. NHS volunteer, maybe something like that. I volunteered for that. We had the Brinsworth Senior Support, which we managed to get the support from all the community champions all around, Tesco's, Morrison's, and they gave us food for our people that were struggling, basically. And sorry, just one moment.
The dogs have gone mad at the front door.
No, somebody's knocking. They'll have to go. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, we managed to look after the community, and you know, I was on speed dial with the community champion at Catcliffe. Cheryl, I've got all this milk. Can you get rid of it? Yes. I've got all of this. Can you get rid of it? Yes, because it was all going out of date and everything like that. Anyway, that kept me going. It kept me going because I was doing what I know best, looking after the community. And obviously I became part of the Excluded, which I think saved my life. Never told you that, Jen, but I think it did. And you know what I did in the Excluded. I was part of it, and you know, I had to come out of it in the end because I couldn't cope with it. You know, anyway. So sorry for digressing, but it's just what it's made me now. It's just anyway. Going back to the self-employment, I logged into the computer. And like you, Maria, the SCISS, it said you're not eligible. I was like, what? I've been 12 years self-employed. Why am I not eligible? And I couldn't understand it. And so I kept going on, and the computer kept saying no. And this is just crazy. What's this all about? And then eventually I realised, and I don't even know, I can't even remember whether it was excluded or what, I don't know, but it basically, because it's the Rishi Sunak had brought these 20 things that, you know, stopped people from getting any help. And mine was the 50% rule. So the 50% rule is basically, my army pension was 52%. No, yes, 52%. So my self-employment was 48%, and it had to be 50% or over. And it wasn't. So I received nothing, not a penny. And from the age of leaving school, 16, I worked all my life. You can go in and check my taxes. It's all there in black and white. What I've earned, everything, absolutely everything. And so I was like, well, I just don't understand. Okay, I can't sign on because I have this small pension, which is not index linked. It doesn't get index linked until I'm 55, which fortunately was last year. So you can imagine, since 2020 to now, I've lived on just a small pension. So I couldn't believe that this was, after serving 22 years for my country, I received nothing from this government during a pandemic. It's crazy, is it not? It's absolutely crazy. And it took me a while for it to all sink in, but I had my community work, so that kept me going. I had the Excluded, that kept me going. I'm just turning over just so I don't lose my way in, because I want to get everything in, because anyway, I was watching COVID pandemic. You know, we went back into a lockdown, didn't we? And I was wondering, you know, when is it going to end? When is it going to end? And for me, it sort of, you know, like I said, it never came back. But the two things that I always remember and will always remember is I'm complicated, apparently, when it comes to my taxes. And I'm fraudulent, because apparently all self-employment people can't be trusted. That's the two things that I got out of this. And I just think, oh my God, I was in the army for 22 years. We had our core values, and one of them was integrity. And my integrity has been torn to shreds. And as you can see, it still upsets me now. And listening to Maria, you know, it brought it all back again. And this is why I feel so upset. And I don't think I'll ever get over it. I don't. And what we do is, well, what I do now is I work in the community. I've never had a job since my business went. My heart wasn't in it like you, Maria. It just wasn't, because I'd built that business up for 12 years. And then I was thinking, well, what's the point? What's the point of all of this? And so what I do is I volunteer. I volunteer for my community now. I put myself up for being a parish councillor because I want to make this community better. And I got in for the second time. And I am so proud to be part of that. And that is what keeps me going now. As for this, the government and how they treated the 3.8 million of us that received nothing is disgusting. Absolutely unforgiving. And I hope one day we will get help. We will get something back. I personally, I can't see it because, you know, like you said, Andy, about the post office saga. I mean, in the armed forces, that was my trade. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's another injustice. But you know,
your dedication to your country is formidable. Not only have you served our country in the for 22 years, you had this injustice with COVID, and okay, your business didn't bounce back, and I know that your mental health took an absolute pasting. But then to go back into public service by looking after your local community is completely admirable, and I thank you for that. And I thank you you both for your work on Excluded UK on team. You know, we're unpaid volunteers. We do this in our own time, but it's our way of giving back. So thank you, Cheryl. I really appreciate it. And it's cases like
thanks
Cheryl.
for giving me the opportunity.
No
Thank you.
problem, darling. No problem. It's cases like Cheryl where, you know, her mental health was absolutely decimated. It wasn't just a financial disaster. There were mental health impacts as well. And this is why we formed the mental health and member welfare team to look after those who were not feeling very well as a result of all this happening. Unfortunately, we know of 37 suicides so far. I know, Andy, last time we spoke, it was 19. It's now 37 at least. We've had hundreds of attempted suicides. I've dealt with 4 in the last 2 weeks alone. So this is still a problem. Those 4, the people that I've spoken to, they are now talking to mental health practitioners, and one of them is in crisis care at the moment. All of them, it was because they couldn't afford their bounce back loan repayments. And there was no light at the end of the tunnel for them, because the fact they couldn't afford it meant that the interest and the loan was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they really, really struggled. Whilst funds allow, we do offer free counselling to Excluded UK members and their immediate family. An example, I have used this before, but it's just so shocking. We had an excluded couple whose son, 9 years old, tried to take his own life twice. And when they went to CAMS, they were told that due to austerity cuts, the criteria for taking new cases on them, was that they had to try to take their own life 3 times. The only time they'd take them on immediately is if they were immediately after a crisis or threatening to take their own lives. But the fact that this couple left it a week before they approached CAMS, they said it was no longer an emergency. We've had members that have been relieved to be diagnosed with cancer because it meant they were finally eligible for some sort of business eligibility for support. Kim, she wants to come on today. She was unable to. Her husband died of a brain tumour just before COVID. She found a pension document that he and her, she said that David probably didn't even know. She cashed it in. HMRC classed that as income, and she got absolutely 0. We still hold a weekly tea and chat. It started off as a mental health support group, 5 till 6 on a Saturday afternoon. You're all welcome to join it. It's still going now. There's a core group of friends that now actually meet up and see each other. And we've been hosting regular events recently. The last couple of months, we've been inviting MPs, as they were then, but now candidates, to come and talk to us, learn about the excluded. Really disappointing. Conservatives, 0. One signed up, but didn't come. So 0 Conservatives have come along to these events, which to us speaks volumes. We're now asking for apology. So this injustice is recognised, but reassurance that it will never happen again. There is every likelihood there'll be another global pandemic because the virus is mutating and evolving. What we cannot happen is for the excluded to be excluded for a second time. So we want reassurance that this will never happen again. We don't see why we shouldn't have parity of support. Everybody else got the support. Why can't we have that? It would certainly plaster over the cracks that have appeared during the pandemic. And we would like an acknowledgement of loss of earnings, profit, and consequential loss. Before I hand over to Andy to say his final piece before he dashes off to his next meeting, I just want to say to the excluded, you do matter. You are viable, and you will always be loved and supported by your excluded family. So thank you all for coming. Thank you to Maria and Cheryl. I'm going to hand over to Andy, who is now going to close this meeting with some closing thoughts. Over to you, Andy. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Jennifer. Thank you, Cheryl. Thanks, Maria, and everyone for joining. I just want to reiterate that last point. You know, there are many of us who do see you and do support you, and you know, you're not kind of hidden from us. So please do remember that, and remember what Jennifer just said. And thanks so much, Cheryl, Maria, just for speaking so powerfully and honestly about your situation. It's hard to hear, and it's so wrong, isn't it? Because in different ways, you're both the heart of the community where you are, and to see the sort of mark that all of this has left on you, but also the loss of the things that you were doing. You know, you should have been supported so you can carry on doing what you were doing, and particularly obviously when you know you've both worked so hard over the years, served your country, Cheryl. It's that, I guess, isn't it? That at the end of it, really, that's the hardest bit, isn't it? You know, the country we all love, we all work to support. In that moment, it almost not seeing you or, you know, making any sort of gesture in your direction. That's the hard thing, isn't it? However, what I also can say though is, in the end, the public see it, the public support you, and that's been the case with the other injustices that we've worked on. And I will, from here, Jennifer, make a commitment to you all to work with you and to make sure that we can have this recognised as one of the injustices that this country needs to rectify. There are others that we're working on. The nuclear test veterans is another that we're working on now, but we need to talk about excluded in the same way. And I can commit to you that I will do that. I gave evidence to the COVID public inquiry. People might recall that, and I did mention the unfair treatment of those excluded. But I mean, just to kind of show why what happened to you was kind of a part of a pattern in that period. People might remember the argument that I had with them over Tier 3 when they sought to impose it on us without support, and I held out and said I wouldn't accept it because of the way in which people who were self-employed, taxi drivers and others, were going to just, you know, face more people were going to be even further harmed. When I kind of saw the papers that I got access to, the government papers, as part of the COVID inquiry, I don't know if anybody saw my evidence, but finally what those papers confirmed is that their treatment of us was vindictive, actually, and very calculated, and there wasn't an evidence base behind it. The reason why I mention that is because I think Cheryl touched on it. The decision making in that period was all over the place. It was random, and it is wrong actually that it isn't being mentioned in the when these issues are coming up during these election hustings. It should be challenged. From our point of view, they did it to a whole place, but in your situation, they did it to thousands and thousands of people all over the country. But it proves that the decision making was not coherent. Now, one thing that is something we should focus on is that the public inquiry is going to move to a future module on business and financial support. I'm sure you know that, Jennifer, but I think we need to start preparing a sort of public dossier that we can work on together, that we present to that inquiry, telling the stories as we've heard today, but also more broadly, describing the impact on people. And I think we should focus on that as a really big thing that we should do. And I'm happy to work with you and submit it as evidence to the inquiry, because I think that's the best thing to sort of look at as a vehicle to advance your cause, basically. Be sort of alongside that, I think we've got to make excluded an issue in the next Parliament. I'm not here to get party political this morning, but what I will say is that there will be an opportunity, I think, when the general election is out of the way. I think there'll be a lot of new people in Parliament who will be very prepared, I think, to support you. And I think there's potentially an opportunity, Jennifer, for an excluded all-party group, so that you start to get a kind of group of people in Parliament who are prepared to fight your cause. In previous campaigns that I've worked on, Hillsborough being an example, the formation of an all-party group really helps to drive things forward. So I think we need to work with you once the new Parliament is elected. And Kevin, who's on this call today from my office, can help with this. There will be some MPs elected who will really understand your position, because of perhaps they were excluded themselves, and we need to sort of find out who those people are. So I know it's probably been extremely hard to feel hopeful at all in the times that we've all been living, but I think there are reasons to feel a little hopeful. Whatever the precise result, I think there is a kind of an era ending and a new one starting, I think, and that will present opportunities for us. But what we've got to do first is to sort of remind people of the scale of this injustice and talk of it as an injustice alongside others. Your treatment has echoes of what I've seen in the other things that I've dealt with. Cheryl talked about the postmasters and postmistresses. It is, I'm afraid, a recurring pattern whereby the British state thinks it can treat some people as second-class citizens and then not be held to account for that. And in some ways, like nuclear test veterans or the infected blood community, your community is similar in that there's people everywhere scattered right across the country. So it's kind of hard in some ways to get a handle on it because it's so big but because of that, it means you've got a power that other campaigns would really want. You've got connections to MPs everywhere. You've got the ability to speak as a huge group that needs to be listened to. So just hold to that. Stick together. Keep working as you are. I think more ability to be heard is coming, and it's coming quite soon. So now is the time to get organised, and now's the time to get our argument together in support of you. And I think we can, those bounce back loans have been mentioned a few times. There is the COVID corruption work that's about to get underway. I think there are ways in which we can sort of start to frame financial asks that I think are fair, proportionate, and and doable. And I think we need to work with you on that as well, alongside the full apology, Jennifer, that you rightly called for. So I hope those are a few helpful thoughts to point the way, if you like, to where we go from here. I'm always available to come on a call like this and work with you. to take these issues forward in the next Parliament. I think there's well, I see plenty of opportunity, actually. You know, if the TV cameras were rolling, listening to you, Cheryl, or you, Maria, then I think they would get interested. You know, again, we've got to find ways, haven't we, of getting your story out there, just so people can see the scale of the harm, really, that the way you were treated as, you know, as caused. And I just think we've, you know, when people hear the power of that, the vast majority of the British public will be 1,000,000% behind you and supporting you, and will be as outraged as you at your treatment. So that's been the way we've always found it with other campaigns that we've worked on. Once you tell the story properly, the public get behind you, and the public will be behind you. They won't be able to justify how you've been treated. And yeah, once we've done that, then I think you'll get momentum behind the campaign. Jennifer, I hope that's helpful as a few reflections. But just from me to all of you, thanks for listening this morning. Thanks for being on. Keep supporting each other. And as I say, as Jennifer said, we see you and we hear you, and we'll keep working with you.
Thank you, Andy. I really appreciate that. And as you know, we did form the largest APPG in history with 262 cross-party MPs at the beginning of our campaign. It disappeared in October 2022. Nobody can tell us what happened, but with the new government forming, we are looking to start up another APPG, and would really appreciate your support in doing that. If there are any candidates watching or any party leaders, it would be really useful to our members if you could publicly support us. People don't know where to put their votes, especially those who used to vote Conservative that do not want to vote Conservative again. So you need to be outspoken and let us know that you're supporting us, and that you will commit to supporting us going forward. There are 3.8 million people, a lot of whom are floating voters at the moment, and need to hear where their vote, where their, you know, X needs to go in which box. So please, please, please be publicly outspoken about your support, and I think you will reap the rewards of that on July the 4th. Yeah, really appreciate your support, Andy. Another point of support we will put in the comments: Excluded UK rely on donations from people. We don't get any funding, obviously, from the government, because we didn't get any funding from the start, which is why we're here. So we really rely on public donations. We do not want excluded people who cannot afford it to put money in the pot, but we do need support financially to keep the group going, and to provide the free counselling support. So,
Jennifer, can I just say, because before I jump off,
yeah,
I do think we need to take forward with you the idea of a submission to the public inquiry.
Yeah.
Because I can use my evidence as the hook for that, and I'm more than happy to submit it with you, because I can link back to my evidence. So before I leave, I just thought, you know, let's keep that fabulous as a very practical thing that we need to move forward. So
that's brilliant. Thank you, Andy. We have made a submission before, but I don't. You can put as many submissions in as you want, can't you? We've got the link. We keep sharing it with our members, but that'd be really great to work with you on that, because your name alone obviously carries some weight. And the fact that you listen to us and work with us, I don't think you can imagine how much that means to our members, that you actually acknowledge that we exist, and that you care for us. So I really do appreciate your support, as do the members and all the Excluded UK.
It's
people.
Always there, you know. You've always got it. It's always there. But let's make sure that the public inquiry doesn't. As I say, because I gave evidence on the topic, I can absolutely use it as a hook just to send in something that we can work up jointly with you, refresh it in some way.
That is brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm going to have to wrap it up there, because Andy's already gone over the time that he promised. But we really appreciate your time. Thank you to Maria and Cheryl. Thank you to everybody who has supported the campaign so far. And as I say, you are loved. You are viable, and we will look after you until you are back fully on your feet. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you all soon at another event, hopefully. Cheers then.